Hey guys, this is Fluffle Stuffing Incorporated, and today I wanted to do an educational video for once. Mostly because my voiceovers, as obnoxious as they are bugging and I have to resort to using this ridiculous thing for now. But enough of that. You are here for the history of the Kozmo archetype. Kozmo were first released as TCG exclusive archetype in Clash of Rebellion. Kozmo are one of the most aggressive decks today, and even upon release, were very aggressive. Their best builds involved cards like Dirigido and Honest to make the best out of Kozmo Farm Girl. The cards released at the time were Kozmo Farm Girl, Good Witch, Slip Rider, Forerunner, and the best of them all, Kozmo Town. The deck was neither too bad or too good. Just a deck with very reliable consistency and recovery from Kozmo Town alone, which is still one of the most powerful field spells to date. Aggression from the previous cards I mentioned, good removal from Slip Rider, and has a very well designed boss monster in Forerunner, being immune to targeting, gives you life points, and floats into smaller Kozmo monsters. But even with all this behind them and the fan favoritism they got, near full power Necrons still beat this deck from just Trishula alone, banishing towns and Forerunners even. The history of Kozmo will have this recurring theme of being very good, but were never good enough to be the best deck at any point of this archetype's time. In Dimension of Chaos, we got more cards, being Kozmo Straw Man, Kozmo Wicked Witch, and Kozmo Dark Destroyer. All of which became instant staples. Straw Man became even more reliable recovery and more so a one-turn kill enabler, due to its ability to summon Farm Girl because of its level, and banished Kozmo ships that blow up, which allowed more flexibility the deck did not have before. Kozmo Wicked Witch became the deck's defense mechanism when it came to battle protection and did an amazing job at it. Because of Wicked Witch, you would have to plan past Dark Destroyers, pilot effects, and how to get past Wicked Witch, which adds another layer of complication. Dark Destroyer was and still is regarded as one of the most broken main deck boss monsters. It is easy to summon, pops a monster on summon, cannot be targeted, and it floats upon destruction. It is the most versatile Kozmo card to date, either destroying as disruption or pop your own monsters to get more attacks in the battle phase for easy one-turn kills or extending your combos. After the Duelist Alliance slaughter list that we call the November 9, 2015 list, Kozmo were seemingly unstoppable, or so everyone thought. Because of Performage Pendulum being a naturally faster deck and access to Ignister Prominence, the Blasting Draka's Lair, which can spin cards without targeting, this deck was pushed back again, although it had some notable success. And it got pushed even further when Magicians and Odd Eyes Magicians were all over the place. So Kozmo took the backseat again. But now on to Breakers of Shadow. This is the pack where this deck got some of its most impressive cards, albeit not as good as Dark Destroyer. With cards like Cosmojo, Dark Eclipser and Tin Can, the deck had more takes and ways to gain pluses while having a passive playing style it can naturally follow because of Tin Can. Cosmojo is searchable disruption that can lead to more one-turn kills or further disruption from floating ships. And other cards like Delta Shuttle, Dogfighter and SOAR Troopers in the future became better and better, even eventually leading to budget Kozmo builds without Destroyer topping occasionally. However, this was after the format that immediately came up. Format was easily dominated by Performages and Pals, which I will say is the best deck of all time. Although Monarchs followed behind at the time with their deck coming out with new amazing support, which I will explain later in the video, had ways around Monarchs too and overwhelmed everything else with its insane combos. So even with new toys, Kozmo was still overwhelmed by its past issues and more. Even after the emergency ban list, Pendulums were still the best deck in the form of Draco Pals, with the Monarchs very close behind. With the same issues in hand, Kozmo was at a huge disadvantage even then. But after the April 11, 2016 ban list, with Draco Pal out of the picture, Kozmo started to take spots at events. Even after losing 2 Reasoning and a copy of Emergency Teleport. However, full power Monarchs still dominated to the point of being possibly tier 0.5. with Stormforth and Erebus being searchable non-targeting removal while easily gathering resources faster than Kozmo ever could. Monarch scrapped on Kozmo, which was the second best deck in most people's eyes. But the possible high point this deck got was with Shining Victories. With the very last wave of Kozmo support, we were given a slew of cards to use. Although cards like Cosmorning and Fearful Lion were always impractical, we got incredible support in the forms of Kozmo Dark Lady, a Divine Wrath on legs, Kozmo Dark Planet, which is their quote-unquote boss monster and spell negation, which helped a ton versus Monarchs, and Kozmo Landwalker, which redirects Kozmo destruction. But because of the release of two highly indirect cards, two new decks, which I believe are incredibly clever, took this deck's consistency and versatility and made it to some of the most iconic builds of Kozmo, being Fire King Kozmo and Demise Kozmo. Fire King Kozmo is the combo variant of Kozmo that explodes with Island and makes insane turn 1 boards, but also plays like normal Kozmo if you do not open Island. Demise Kozmo is the most salt I have ever felt with a deck I actually liked. Drawing Kozmo monsters with Kozmo Town was not so bad once you got Kozmo Town to return those cards to get another chance at drawing traps and artifacts to disrupt more. However, Monarch still dominated them because of the ways it can play around the turn 1 boards Fire King Kozmo can make, whether if it were either with Stormforth if going first, or Stormforth Erebus going second without using a lot of life points and resources. And extra deck Monarchs outclassed it as a combo deck. And Demise Kozmo was hurt in just the same ways, but were not as prone to it as Fire King Kozmos were. The ban list following this format is where the Kozmo train ends its long run as a consistent top-tier threat, as Dark Destroyer and Emergency Teleport got limited. Although the deck was still usable, the format had to make itself from there, as the top 2 decks were hit, and Monarchs took the worst end, losing to Pantheism, Stormforth, and Aether. Although there are many builds and times where Kozmo reared its head into top cuts, it was highly occasional and builds that top typically used engines like Metal Foes, Zoo and True Kings, True Dracos. The deck still has tricks up its sleeve, while having anti-spell fragrance and viruses for anti-meta strategies, and there are times that targeting becomes better and Kozmo can play at those times with decent success. So how good were Kozmos? They actually had a very consistent run. But they had too many issues to ever be the best deck in the game at any given point. That's it for this video. And if you guys like it, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, join the Frightful Army, and together we will beat the meta. Talk to you guys next time. Take care.